off to the space race in a new series over on Disney Plus, The Right Stuff. The third episode is now up and I just watched it, so stick with me and I'll break it down after the intro. Well, hello there. My name's Jeremy and welcome back to Freeform Disney, where I talk about all aspects of Disney, from the animated movies to the theme parks to Star Wars, Marvel, and Pixar, and the TV shows, and everything else in between. And that is why it's Freeform. And keep coming back every day for new daily content. If you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Today we're looking a little more at Disney's latest drama series, The Right Stuff, which is the story of the Mercury 7 astronauts. Now, the third episode is called Single Combat Warrior, and without any further time to waste, let's just jump right on in. So here is what went down. We start in, we see we're over at Cape Canaveral in the Mercury Command Center, and we're go for launch. We're 80 hours to the MA-1 launch. In other words, the Mercury Atlas 1 launch. Now, they're doing some simulation tests, and we get some controversy in there. Chris Kraft, our flight director, and Hutmacher, not on good terms right there. Yeah, no pressure, right? Just the world will be watching. Well, then we jump off and we're going to get to see some of the Mastiff machine. That's the one where it simulates a spacecraft going out of control and all the G-forces that's going to do and all the trick of that and trying to then get it under control. So not the simplest thing to have to deal with. And so we get to see a bit of that. And, well, so everyone's going through it, but Al ends up pushing and does not make it through this one. So not everybody's making it through perfectly fine. So that's clearly going to be a big thing this episode. And we have our continuing countdown. We get to 72 hours, and we'll keep doing that all the way through this episode just to get closer to the launch. Dun, dun, dun. We also see tensions really rising among the astronauts. Really not knowing who will be first isn't helping, as well as their personalities conflicting. We don't get to really dig into that too much, but there's one other good moment of it in this episode. We get to see John Glenn a little more with our ever-popular Wainwright from Life magazine. And just these lines that he brings to him. Even Wainwright's like, hey, did you write this stuff in advance? Just a little bit. Never hurts to be prepared. Even makes you think probably bringing the trumpet out there was probably intentional too, just to show off that side. After all, John Glenn never misses an angle, right? Now, there were some nice moments between Al and his wife, as well as John Glenn and his wife talking over the phone, because at this point they're down in Cape Canaveral while their families are, well, just quite a few miles away, shall we say. And it was nice seeing the concern between Al and his wife and, well, actually the doubt that's finally showing up for Al. This super cocky guy, it just adds a little more dimension to him as a character, and that was nice. And over in John Glenn's side, talking to his wife, well, as he says, it's just not my world down there, while the rest are all partying in the pool. Not Mr. Straight-Laced John Glenn. Not drinking, not partying, and yeah, just the love between the two is really nice. As we go further forward, we get to see a little more in terms of the Mercury program. We got a little at the beginning by getting to see some of the simulation, even if it was quick. But now we get to see them check out their prototype custom seats. And there's certainly some jokes to go around on that. They still have to wait to see the capsule, though, because that capsule prototype is not arriving till tomorrow. And we're, well, a couple days out from the actual launch of MA-1 at this point. And here's a moment where we get a little more of that interaction between John Glenn and the other astronauts, where he's just experimenting flying in the car, pushes his seat down, and turns himself backwards as if he were actually in the Mercury spacecraft. And then they prank him with like this stuffed fake alligator, and again, you see a little of that distance between John Glenn and the rest of them. We get to see Al Shepard continuing to go ahead and do the Mastiff over and over again. This is something he's going to keep working at. This really got to him and got under his skin that he wasn't able to go ahead and do it. So, yeah, you can expect he's going to keep doing it till he actually gets there. And with that, we head off to our heads, good old Bob Gilruth and Chris Kraft, who are talking about the upcoming launch a little bit. And then we shift over to Chris Kraft having seen some volleyball being played. And it's like, hey, that's a good idea for some team building with my people too. And a bit of a grudge between Hutmacher and himself come up there. Yeah. Speaking of Chris Kraft, there's an interesting meeting that happens later where he and John Glenn are in his office. And, well, John Glenn touches his signed baseball. How dare you touch that? It was signed by Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth. I don't want you touching it. It's a clear setup for later down the road, considering how famous John Glenn is going to get. Well, anyway, the point of that scene was John Glenn wants to go ahead and give a personal tour to his congressman. Always knows an angle right there. Although Chris Kraft, not going for it. John Glenn's just not being a good enough team player, needing to do that instead. And he might have a point. And then it's time for some temptation for Gordo. Gordo, who's trying to put his marriage back together. The astronauts are all off at the bar, and, well, you can guess where that's going pretty quick. So Patricia meets Gordo there, and they hit it off quick. You can tell where that's heading, and they head back to the hotel, off to the pool, and Gordo, trying to resist a little, shall we say, but certainly not enough. But luckily for him, he gets interrupted by cannonballing fellow astronauts right before it goes too far. And then that ends up leading, after they get out of the pool a little bit, to a fight between Gus and Gordo. And this is actually an interesting piece because we just don't get to see that much of people like Gus or the other interactions between the astronauts. And this was just like a moment where we finally got a bit of that. Finally got a little bit of showing, not telling, is part of what I think it is too. Because I think this show does a lot of telling and doesn't do a great job of just giving us an idea of what's going on and being able to let us read between the lines. But this scene was good. Ultimately, it turns into a pretty decent fight between Gus and Gordo because I guess Gordo almost got Gus killed back by not having done a pre-check in the past. And so Gus was just fed up with Gordo bragging and telling the famous story, so they probably all have a similar story of. So, yeah. Then we see Al Shepard. He went over to the Mastiff machine by himself in the middle of the night. No one else. Perhaps not the wisest plan he's ever come up with. Just that obsessed with going ahead and doing it. And, well, luckily Dee is still over at the base getting things ready for the next day and ends up having to go ahead and treat him and, well, they end up doing a medical examination because Al Shepard is worried about whether there's other deeper things going on. And hey, it's confidential unless it endangers himself or the mission. Which would be why Al Shepard lies about the hearing loss and the dizziness. Yeah. That said, Al Shepard and Dee will keep running this again and again over the rest of the episode until Al Shepard gets it down. And he makes it through. Yeah. Well, let's shift off to our other astronaut we actually care about. Off to John Glenn. So John Glenn, well, he was listening to everybody partying, got a little sick of that, and headed off to the bowling alley. Which Eunice, back from the staff, had invited him there. And so there was this church thing going on, a little study group kind of thing, something of that nature. We get a temptation of John Glenn. Dot is busy flirting with John Glenn quite a bit, and then he drives her back to her place, and yeah. Now, the conversation between the two was a well-done piece of acting. It really was. As far as the pieces of acting in this show, it's probably one of the better ones. Now, John Glenn does end up staying straight-laced through the end. I wish you well. And so she leaves, he drives back off. And now we get one of those moments I was hoping to see. Just see how they went ahead and showed it. And this is the shot of them seeing the Mercury capsule for the first time. The music was nicely done, their reactions on their faces, the reverence they had just for seeing it. And then the reactions they have when they hear that the capsule is controlled from the ground and there are no controls in there. Not even a good window because, hey, you can't pilot it because it's controlled from the ground, so you don't need to. Yeah. John Glenn's going to have a few words about that. And that certainly is true from reality, too, from everything we know, that they did help design it. And then we get to see the families arrive as we're getting up to that launch. We get to see Gordo and his wife see each other again, have a little interaction there, and that's nice. John Glenn complaining to his wife about not being able to show the congressman around because he's finally got somebody to talk to. And, well, horny, and we get to do that, of course, too. So, yeah, been a little while. Then we get to see the women do a photo shoot in front of the capsule, and Mrs. Carpenter trying to outshine the rest. Talk about that floral pattern dress compared to the rest of them, huh? And that actually also, speaking of things pulled from real history right there. Okay, so let us get to the launch itself. Off to control, and we get to see some of their final prep, and we see Flight Director Chris Kraft going ahead and making a speech, and hey, I don't really care if you hate me or yada yada yada, just as long as you're here you care enough. And so hey, he kicks Mr. Ryerson out for not caring enough. Little flex of power in front of your boss there, just a bit? Yeah, it seems that way. They're the things that just don't hit you as real. You kicked him out just as you're finishing getting ready for the final bit of launch. Yeah, sure you did. Right. Probably not. But who knows, maybe somebody has a piece of history that will confirm that actually happened. Well, anyway, the families and the astronauts themselves are all watching, plus some political people, and the media are off a distance further away. Well, and John Glenn offers the congressman a private tour anyway, because of course he does. Now, it's fun to watch the families interacting, watching the rocket lifting off, both in the control room and the audience. Yeah, fun to watch. And then, kaboom, with the media watching. And everybody's like, oh my God, kaboom. Now, I'll take a note here and say, that never happened. Well, I mean, Man-Made 1 did actually fail, yes, but no one saw it. Because it was actually a rainy, cloudy day. So, yeah. And also the reactions were certainly different in reality. Heck, there's a story about how Al Shepard made a comment something along the lines of, oh, well, at least we got that out of the way. Kind of one of those bad dress rehearsal makes for a good opening night, right? At least we got that explosion out of the way. We don't have to worry about it in the actual launches. Here in the show, though, no, everybody freaked out, and Al Shepard is having a bit of a panic attack where his hearing's gone a little bit. As for what actually happened to it and why, we're going to leave that clearly for the next episode. And hey, that is where we ended the episode off on. And only one episode this week, not like the first week where we had a double to start with. So where am I at on this series? I think Single Combat Warrior, in some ways at least, felt weaker to me than the first two. And perhaps that's a bit of the newness wearing off and I'm not cutting it as much slack. Or perhaps it's also part that it just looks like the show is not going to grow past where it was in those first two episodes. I love space, I love NASA, I love the history of NASA. But this show sometimes, dang. Heck, if you change the name of the characters and just a tiny bit of change to the background of the story, it could easily enough have nothing to do with space. And that's a problem for me. In actual reality, there is so much drama having to do with NASA, all the training they went through, heck, making this program work in the first place, and I feel like we don't get to see it. And as for the Mercury 7, we only really get to see 3 of them. And what's weird about that is even those 3, I don't feel like I'm really getting to know them as well as I should after having watched 3 full episodes at this point. Yeah, so that's some of my problems, but there are certainly lots of good moments in here too, don't get me wrong. Some great acting throughout this as well. Don't take it at all to be that my problem more comes to the writing and the directing of this than it does to the actual acting. Yeah, so I'm going to give it at least another week. We'll see how next week's episode goes, but dang, this is just, it's not pulling around for me to where I'd like it to. I'm enough of a fan of space and history, and hey, to some degree maybe a completionist when it comes to different space dramas and whatnot, even though there's plenty that I haven't seen still. So I'm hoping it turns around here for me. And hey, hopefully you are enjoying it. Hopefully you're enjoying it a lot more than me, for that matter. I certainly have no need for everyone to agree with me, and I prefer that whatever you're doing, you're having a good time doing it. Sadly for me, it just isn't there right now. But hey, on to next week's episode, and hopefully it'll start picking up and solving some of those issues that I'm having a problem with right now. And we're at that point, so, well, what about you? Did this episode fall a little flat for you, or are you loving it even more with this one? And what was your favorite part of the episode? Let me know down below in the comments. And thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like, a share, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you back here tomorrow for another new episode of Freeform Disney. Have a magical day, and may the Force be with you. Always.